Well, welcome everyone. It's Monday, 5:30 East Coast time here in the US, and it's the next day for our lovely guest, Belinda Fettke. It's Tuesday morning for her down in Tasmania, and we're going to get into some really great conversation here for our Monday Ovadia Heart Health live stream. Before we get started, though, we have one housekeeping detail. Want to let everyone who's either listening, watching, or will be tuning into the recording at another time. This program, along with our other live streams on Monday, is not intended for personal medical advice. If you are interested in working with Dr. Ovadia and the Ovadia team, please reach out to us at team@ifixhearts.com. Again, this is for education and inspiration only. So welcome, Belinda.
Thank you so much, Krisna.
Really great to have you here. I've been a follower, I don't know what we call them these days, a groupie of your work since you started the whole journey with Gary, your husband. But there's probably going to be some listeners tuning in today that are familiar with your work, as well as some who are not. Can you give us the shortened Belinda Fettke version of what you've been doing and what you're currently doing?
I can, but firstly, I'd like to say thank you so much. And how awesome was it that we've actually gotten to meet in person? Because so many times when I do an interview with people, I have never actually physically met them. And thanks to Pam and Doug and Low Carb USA event in San Diego in August. And we got to meet in person, Krisna. It was really, really lovely. And this whole space is very, very inspiring. And we got to chat a little bit about what you're doing, and very excited to be here today. So
thank you very much. It was just lovely.
Yeah, my story is very long and complex, but it began when Gary started working out. That as an orthopedic surgeon, my husband, as an orthopedic surgeon, started seeing that people would improve their health outcomes with type 2 diabetes. So he was amputating. He was actually operating on someone every single week in his clinic, whether it was debriding a bit of rotting flesh, or whether it was removing a toe or a lower foot, even a lower leg at times, every single week here in Tasmania. And he's just like, it had exploded. It become a tsunami of type 2 diabetes complications. And as he started to understand food as medicine, or understand how much of an impact sugar could have on healing for type 2 diabetes, and the ramifications of that was just phenomenal. And he started talking about it. He started firstly talking to his patients, and then he started talking to the community and to other medical doctors. And my daughter and I got him, when we were actually coming over to San Diego one year, we said to him, look, you've got to get onto Facebook. You have such a good message on there. I'd been on for quite a few years as a photographer. And so we snuck him on, we signed him up, and he had about 5,000 people following him on Facebook, where he was talking about the harms of sugar. And that was the start of it. He wasn't even talking about low carb, healthy fats at the beginning. It was literally reducing sugar. And he started to be targeted by Coca-Cola on his Facebook page. And then he started to realize he was creating a few ripples. He'd go, wow, this is amazing. And next thing we know, he's reported to the medical board here in Tasmania for talking about reducing sugar by a dietitian at the hospital where he was working. And when Gary got the notification, he thought, oh, they're going to throw this out. Like, this is ridiculous. And instead they went, no, we're going to pursue this. And they pursued it for 2.5 years, Krisna. So 2.5 years. And as time went on, I mean, obviously as time went on, he started to learn more and more. He actually pretty much provided them with a PhD thesis of all the information, all the studies that he could find that supported reducing sugar, and then low carb, and then healthy fats, and all of those things. So he became the most ardent biochemistry student you've ever met as a mature age. And he just wanted to know more and more. He wanted to understand about the Krebs cycle, which he said he learned at university and then sort of forgot about, because when you do your medical education, when you look back at it, it's so siloed. You learn about this and that and this and that. You don't actually understand how everything crosses over. And I think that's the problem in medicine today. And no doubt Dr. Ovadia would also agree that this is why we're getting into so much trouble, because doctors have become so specialized in an area and afraid to step out of the guidelines and look into nutrition, look into exercise, look into sleep, look into red light therapy, look into all of these other things that are affecting our health. So the next journey, I just went, oh my gosh, they're actually going to silence my husband. They told him he couldn't use social media anymore. He wasn't allowed to talk about nutrition. And in fact, in 2016, he became the only medical doctor in the world. It was at the same time as Tim Noakes's trial. So I'm not sure if others are aware of that, but they were happening simultaneously. And except that Tim's was very open, it was public. Gary's was all behind closed doors here in Australia. We couldn't even have a lawyer. It was shocking. And so I just went, they're silencing him. What can I do? How can I change this? At the time, I was a photographer. I had been a nurse in my past life, but I was photographing weddings and babies. I was in this beautiful, happy space, and my poor husband's getting hammered. And I thought, I've got to do something to help him. And as I often say, when I realized that cereal for brekkie, the hashtag cereal for brekkie was coming after my husband, the mama bear came out. And I started looking into, in particular, the expert witness that was brought into Gary's APRA investigation to determine if an orthopedic surgeon could possibly talk about reducing sugar. The crazy thing is he can talk about exercise, even though he's not an exercise physiologist. He can talk about the health benefits of reducing cigarettes, even though he's not a respiratory physician. But, oh gosh, get into sugar and that's a no-go zone. And we had no idea at the time. So if you think about it, when you're reported to the medical board, it should actually be a peer who's coming in to determine if you're speaking outside the guidelines. So it should have really been an orthopedic surgeon at least in Tasmania or down in Hobart. Tassie's only a very small little dot at the end of Australia, so we're a pretty small community down here. But it could have been in Victoria or New South Wales. But instead, they brought in the biggest nutrition gun in the Southeast Asia Pacific region. And my alarm bells went off. And I've said numerous times, I studied nursing in the hospital system before it became a university, or it was starting to swap over to be university, but I chose to do it in the hospital. And so we would walk around and we would see people who looked sick, and we would think, why? We weren't necessarily in a university just being siloed with information overload and then coming in to try and assess people. And I think because I was never siloed, I was never trained to research in a silo, I started to see patterns of things that didn't make sense. And so especially this expert witness, I thought, oh gosh, when he didn't reply to me when I wrote to him a couple of times, I thought, he must work for the sugar industry. But it turns out, Krisna, he worked for the cereal industry. And that's where I've gone ever since.
What a story. So I want to just unpack a few pieces. But
Yes.
It's really incredible to think about this. I mean, again, I'm going to give away a little bit of the story of
Yes.
you won, Gary won his case, as did
After 4.5
Professor
years.
Tim Noakes. And for those listeners, this is really important to understand that 2 times before a court of law, the low carbohydrate community, under the great sort of effort, energy, and work from, well, your case, you and Gary, and then Tim Noakes' case, his battery of people behind him, actually won. You provided the science and the defense of your case in a court of law, and this is unprecedented. But where I want to kind of go is this siloed effect that you've mentioned several times of individuals. So you're having a court case against an orthopedic surgeon, but they bring in the nutritionist as expert witness,
who worked for the cereal industry for at least 16 years that I can find on the Wayback Machine. And specifically, while he was determining Gary's outcome, he was working for Sanitarium here in Australia, which makes breakfast cereals. And it's just like, are you kidding me? Wow.
This is incredible. And this highlights what we labeled as the topic today, the hidden influences in the dietary guidelines. So we have this backdrop of the court case and how you became involved, and then take us a little bit further, Belinda.
Yes, well, once I started to realize he was involved with the cereal industry, I started Googling a few different things. As I say, thank goodness. 5 years earlier, we would have known nothing, Krisna, because we couldn't have accessed all this information on the internet. So it just so happens that potentially people who've tried to highlight this beforehand have not had this same access to be able to uncover the vested interests and the religious ideology shaping our plant-based dietary guidelines. But I went looking and I uncovered documentation stating that Gary was targeted for active defence by a group that called themselves the Australian Breakfast Cereal Manufacturers Forum, trading as Cereal for Brekkie. His name was detailed as the only medical doctor.
Incredible.
And this was a collaboration. So the Australian Breakfast Cereal Manufacturers Forum, the ABCMF, were paying the Dietitians Association of Australia $23,000 a year for them to use their members. So dietitians had no idea that their educating body, that their accrediting body, and their regulatory body here in Australia, the DAA, was taking $23,000 from the cereal industry to provide information to say that cereal was so healthy. It's the way to start the day. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. All of these messaging that was coming through, and don't demonize sugar. And Gary was targeted for active defence, and the CEO of the DAA wrote to Gary's hospital twice asking them to shut him up. I can't even make this up, Krisna.
Yeah,
It was
really
so targeted.
It's like a novel or a story for a movie. However,
is.
it actually happened. And I do want to remind, I see our listeners, if you've got questions for Belinda or for myself, please put them in the chat for us. And it's the ultimate story of follow the money. You followed where they were working, and uncovered really the essence of why they did not want Gary to talk.
Well, I'm not saying it's only cereal for brekkie. I can assure you, I've chatted with Tim Noakes, Gary and I've chatted with him, and he could show specifically how Coca-Cola came after him. But I believe Coca-Cola came after Gary as well. The cereal industry came after him, Coca-Cola, and I'm have no doubt the pharmaceutical industry, Novo Nordisk, was not happy either because they're about to lose all their customers. So it's a very tangled web, but because so many other people have talked about so many other elements of this vested interest shaping the guidelines, and mine specifically has gone down the cereal for brekkie route because I could find definitive information showing that they were targeting Gary. And that has just unraveled the most amazing things. And I think I spoke to you in America and just said, for the first couple of years when I was doing my research, I couldn't talk about it. I had no idea what to talk about. I was very confronted, and I think it's important to put in here, like, I'm not anti-vegan, vegetarian, I'm not anti-religion, but I have to challenge. And Gary convinced me after 2 years. He just said, you need to start writing it down. He spoke about it first at the CrossFit Games in 2017, when Tim Noakes also spoke about his trial. So we had this opportunity, and Gary said, I want to talk about it first because I'm a bit worried about you talking about it. So I went, okay. But I think in the end, he convinced me I had to talk about it because this was harming people. And the harm that this messaging is doing, that the guidelines are doing, and I've discovered how much influence we'll get into it, the Seventh-day Adventist Church on the dietary guidelines has been phenomenal, going right back. In fact, Joan Sabate and Jim Banter were co-authors with some others on an article that came out after Gary presented my work. And it's called The Global Influence of the Seventh-day Adventist Church on Diet. And they are embracing the fact that they've had such an incredible influence on it. They talk about nutrition science starting with the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And they even reference my work within their references at the bottom. So I was like, wow, okay. So, it is huge. And I didn't make that title up. That's their title. And it really is that big. And I often say in America, I believe the Adventist health reform message is literally sweeping across the United States and embedding itself in the very fabric of your society. It's coming through so many levels. It's coming through hospital healthcare. It's coming through education. It's coming through the blue zones, which we'll probably get into, and lifestyle medicine. All of these elements are embedding themselves, and often you don't even realize it's got a religious or ideological background to demonize animal protein and fat. So let's dive in. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, where to start on that? And I think it's very important. You're very clear. You're not anti-vegan as we are, not anti-vegan. I was a 20-year vegetarian. I mean, what we're promoting here is just clarity on
Yes.
the sources of what is behind your message, who's funding it, and also to promote this idea that wellness, if you're an orthopedic surgeon and you'd like to see your patients become healthy, nutrition is a big part of that. And, you know, as you can talk about exercise, why couldn't we talk about nutrition? But let's unpack these mysterious, because, well, first and foremost, the first two that you'll hear in most conversations here in America are lifestyle medicine. And even that phrase, people were saying all the time, you know, food is medicine, or that lifestyle medicine has a very strong influence here, as do the blue zones, if they even exist. So which one would you like to start with?
Well, let's start with lifestyle medicine, because that's what I found first. And I think it's a good spot to delve into. So this expert witness here in Australia, he, as I say, he was working for Sanitarium and had been since at least 2000, when I unpackaged different bits and pieces about him. His wife was spearheading research for ILSI, the International Life Sciences Research Institute, founded by Coca-Cola. And just, what on earth is that got to do with anything? But anyway, she's spearheading. So that's the Coca-Cola influence, I believe, that came through to Gary. But he was also the patron of lifestyle medicine here in Australia. And I was thinking, well, I've never even heard of lifestyle medicine. I was quite naive back in 2014, 2015, looking into these spaces. So I decided to do a bit of a deep dive. And here in Australia, it was founded by a man called Gary Egger. And I don't believe he was a Seventh-day Adventist, but he may well be. It's very hard to find out people's religions here in Australia, because we're a fairly secular society and people don't talk about it openly. But as far as I'm aware, I don't believe he was. But in 2000, he'd worked for ILSI and the World Health Organization, and he'd done a big presentation talking about how important it was to get rid of unhealthy food, which he called fatty meat. Unhealthy food, but I'm sure it was junk food as well. But he actually said fatty meat in the South Pacific to improve their health outcomes, because diabetes is just rampant in the South Pacific here. And in his presentation, he talked about how to use the church. He didn't say which church, but how to use the church, how to use church members to run health programs, how to use the church to be involved in the messaging. And when I think about a church that could be involved in all of this, the Seventh-day Adventist Church definitely comes to mind. And I'll just quickly talk a little bit before we get to the lifestyle medicine, because
Please do. Yeah.
It all adds up. So then I was thinking, well, you know, where is this coming from? And Sanitarium, I thought, isn't that owned by a church? Vaguely in my head, I grew up in Sydney, but it's got a very, very small physical footprint here in Australia, the Seventh-day Adventist Church. It's got the one food industry, which also provides food for 30 other countries. And it's Aussie Kids are Weet-Bix kids here in Australia. We all sing the jingle. We don't even think about the fact that we're promoting a church. We think about the cereal, which is a very important part of Australian culture. And I just kept going, what is it about this? So then I started looking back at the founding of the church and came to understand that it's a movement that came from the Great Disappointment in 1844, the William Miller and the Millerite movement. And they, after Jesus didn't return in 1844, a lot of people just went back to their religions that they'd left previously, a lot of Methodists. Some broke off into other little groups, but the remnant church, or the little flock, grew bigger and bigger and bigger. And the founders of that were, amongst them were Ellen G. White and her husband, James. Well, they weren't married then. They got married shortly after. But in 1863, that church was incorporated. And the year it was incorporated, she had her major vision from God about health reform. And part of this messaging, which they've since said was spiritually borrowed and all sorts of other things to try and calm down the fact that she seems to have borrowed a lot of information from a lot of other health reformers at the time, she claimed all of this was totally given to God, totally given to her by God. And in it, he said that flesh meat defiled men, women, and children morally, physically, and spiritually. And was, in fact, some of her statements were that meat was never to be put in place in front of your child at the table if you wanted your prayers to be answered for them. So we're talking about very, very strong language about the harms of animal proteins and fats. And she wanted to talk about fruit, grains, nuts, and seeds were the God-appointed diet for man, found in the Garden of Eden before sin. And interestingly, John Harvey Kellogg was only 12 years old when he went to work for the first family of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And he was typesetting her books before he became a doctor, when they paid for him to do medicine. And then he became the doctor at their Battle Creek Sanitarium. But in the very first book that he was typesetting for her, she spoke only of how to mothers of how to deter their children from masturbating. And while there were numerous things, including a soft bed and sleeping with groups of friends, and spices, tea, coffee, she talked about alcohol for adults, but for children, meat was the most important. She really believed that meat animalized nature and encouraged people to masturbate. So I say, is it any wonder that when he grew up, all he wanted to do was create foods to take the place of flesh, meat, milk, eggs, and butter, which is what she claimed the health food business was to do when she came to Australia in 1895. So it's a fascinating history going back. But now if we jump quickly to lifestyle medicine, so again, it'll interlap with the blue zones, it overlaps. That's where all my research just kept coming together and I'd see more and more patterns. But Loma Linda was bought by Ellen G. White in 1905. It was an abandoned hotel, Krisna, which I mentioned in my talk in America. So she bought this abandoned hotel. They were having a bit of a schism with John Harvey Kellogg and Battle Creek. He was wanting to he wanted the medical education to be more medical, and she wanted it to keep it as medical evangelism. She wanted to create missionaries and be more aligned with her teachings. So she bought this abandoned hotel which became Loma Linda. And from within a year, they were already running nursing schools and started their first food industry, Loma Linda Foods. They are based on John Harvey Kellogg's one and the Australian Sanitarium. Then she opened the College of Medical Evangelists, which was to train doctors, and they opened schools, and it just grew and grew and grew. So again, like all the other blue zones, which are ancestral communities that work hard on the land, this was plopped on there. So we'll get to that later. But part of this thing was then I looked at lifestyle medicine, and it was founded on the Loma Linda University campus in 2003 or 2004. That's what it said. It was founded then when I went back and looked. And I was thinking, well, that's a Seventh-day Adventist place. So the Australian one is separate, but we talked about Garriega and how he looked at the church. That was not founded till 2008. So then I went back and I found this one from 2004 in America. And we had Walter Willett as an advisory board member back then, but it wasn't until Stephen Blair joined the American College of Lifestyle Medicine in about 2010. So Stephen Blair was very involved with Coca-Cola, and he founded the Global Energy Balance Network, and had O'Connor called out as being a front for Coca-Cola. He joined the American College of Lifestyle Medicine on the board of advisors. Now, if you look at Ellen G. White's actual messaging, she was anti-caffeine. So I couldn't work out why Coca-Cola was pulled in to this group. But going all the way back, and it's a complicated history, and I'm probably really confusing everyone. I'm so sorry, I'm jumping around the place. But at Harvard, back in the day, Mervyn Harding from the College of Medical Evangelists had worked with Fred Stair. And I believe this symbiotic relationship to promote the demonization of animal proteins and fats worked, because they wanted to prove that vegetarianism was healthy and the others wanted to protect sugar. And they were prepared to compromise because it was more important to both groups to demonize animal proteins and fats. And that's what I think happened with the American College of Lifestyle Medicine as well, that they were prepared to take that on. But boy, once Stephen Blair got there, that American College of Lifestyle Medicine grew like nobody's business. Once they had Coca-Cola funding, and Coca-Cola actually sponsored events, like very obviously events in 2013 and 14. So it's quite phenomenal where that came from. But on the Wayback Machine, when I went really digging, because the American College of Lifestyle Medicine never changed their URL, I was able to go back and find it was actually founded in 2003 as the what's it called? The college. No, I can't remember the acronym. Anyway, it was founded in 2003 as an Adventist group before they changed to the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. That has been so powerful in creating medical education and sorry, not just Loma Linda and Harvard University, but now they're going through so many different universities in America. As you say, it's really becoming just a common knowledge that lifestyle medicine is so important, but that's where the foundation is.
And it's complicated, but very direct links to their philosophy, to their religion, to what they believe
to a plant-biased message. And if you start to look at their resources, you look at the American College of Lifestyle Medicine plate, there's not a single animal protein or fat on there, not even for children. And not any,
or I don't say all, but if you look to often where people will say, well, this source is a good source for the defense of a plant-based diet. And very often it'll link to Loma Linda, to research done at Loma Linda. And for any who are listening, Fred Stair, Walter Willett, these are two prominent individuals who have been at Harvard for decades. So those links to the industry there, you have this even Seventh-day Adventist at the Loma Linda, all kind of converging here to create something maybe that even sounds very official, like Lifestyle Medicine, the College of Lifestyle Medicine. It sounds very official. You think, wow, okay, there's maybe a college, university that is really looking into the research behind what makes us healthy from a lifestyle perspective. But yet, if you pull back the curtain, there's something very different underneath.
Yeah, well, I think Ellen G. White said that medical evangelism was the right arm of the church, and their health message, the entering wedge, to get to places that people wouldn't necessarily listen to a religious message. So that's quite scary, that they're going into these places knowing that they want to convert people. And I say conversion, but even almost more importantly, they just need everybody to hear their message, because their belief is that everybody needs to hear the third angel's message, in which Ellen added the health reform into it. So if everyone understands they need to give up meat, they've heard that message, they can choose if they want to or they don't want to. And, that's potentially their salvation. But it's not going to affect the Seventh-day Adventist Church's salvation as long as everyone's been told about it. So that's why that's why lifestyle medicine is just wanting to go everywhere. That's why the blue zones want to go everywhere. That's why all of this messaging. But yes, lifestyle medicine. So I came and spoke in America about the blue zones in particular. And because I really wanted to do a lot of work into that. I actually spoke about it in 2019 when an Australian, Saul Newman, first did a big research paper into questioning the birth certificates. So that was sort of my introduction to it. I'd been looking a little bit into the blue zones from the point of view that I knew Loma Linda was a blue zone. So I was trying, I was aware of it. But when Saul Newman put his work out in 2019, I thought, wow, that's really interesting. He's challenging the birth certificates. So that piqued my interest a little bit more, and I went down the Weston A. Price pathway, and honestly, Sally Fallon Morell has done the most brilliant work in that area of the traditional blue zones. And I started really looking into that space. Again, I came back to it. I had a couple of years off, Krisna. There's so much work. My head is exploding, and I sort of felt like I'd talked about a lot of things, and was it going anywhere? Was it making an impact? I just felt like lifestyle medicine was getting bigger. All these things were just getting bigger and bigger. And I saw the 2023 Netflix documentary, How to Live to 100, and when my daughter's friends started saying, oh, we need to eat like the blue zones, we need to eat a plant-based diet, I was like, what? Okay, I'm back. I'm back. I need to set the record straight here. So yes, I acknowledge Saul Newman's work, and he was integral to me piquing my interest, but it's a fascinating topic about the birth certificates, and I did do a little touch on it, and I think it's very important. But if you just look at the nutrition, Bill Schindler did an amazing talk with a few people. I've heard him speak, and he's an anthropologist. He's gone into what people actually ate in Sardinia, and he was there for a while. I think it was over a week he was there, just talking to people about how to create their traditional foods. And he was just given, salamis and beautiful fermented cheeses and meats every single day. But on the weekend, they'd have a giant spit roast. And he actually said to them, how often do you eat meat? Thinking he'd heard the Blue Zones thing where they don't eat meat very often and just been fed meat. And they said once a week through an interpreter. And I say, cultural mistranslation. Was that planted by Dan Buettner many, many years ago? I can't say. Or do they really think eating meat is that big spit roast? And they just don't count all the other foods because that's just life. That's just what they eat. And that's very, very important to understand in all of them, in Sardinia, in Okinawa, in Nicoya, and in Ikaria. They all eat meat.
Absolutely.
And they raise it in the past. So we're talking about elders. The elders in those communities, especially in 2005, they had grown their own food, raised their own animals, prepared their own food. There was nothing processed or bought. Like this is real food preparation. And then you go to somewhere like Loma Linda, the home of processed food. They were making food to take the place of flesh, meat, milk, eggs, and butter that these other groups had lived on.
Well, and the Kellogg's, if you follow the Kellogg's to Battle Creek, that was all about graham crackers and cereal, right?
And then he made the first artificial meats. He made the nut meat. He invented and patented artificial meat and soy meat and soy meat analogs, all of these things. He was one of the earliest proponents of soy as a human food in America. We're not talking about the soy that was fermented culturally in Asia and that they took a long time to get rid of the irritants and the harms of it. We're talking about industrialized soy proteins in America, in Australia.
Processed product, a process.
And it's just so different. It can't compare.
I want to take one little pause. I have a great comment here from Red Pill. Glad the Fettke couple exists on YouTube, giving hope to folks. Very nice. Appreciate that. And Alistair says mine too. And as a note, if anyone would like to, get into the real writing, I highly recommend that you follow Belinda on Substack. Truth Zones is her handle, title, truthzones.substack.com. She's got some great posts there, and you can continue to follow. If you're listening and you want to know more about the Ovadia team and our work with companies, highly recommend you look to our website, Ovadia Heart Health Wellness, there, just as a little pause if you're looking for more information. But these links, Belinda, you've got the Loma Linda, you've got
Yes.
the College of Lifestyle Medicine. You have also these very influential forces at Harvard that are infiltrating the research, infiltrating hospitals, infiltrating
medical education.
educational system, right?
Yeah.
The education of nutritionists, of dietitians. It is a very powerful force. Now, I'll have often people say to me, that's overwhelming. What would be a just very practical thing on an individual, and we'll get into maybe what companies can do, what an individual can do to help them understand these influences on what's being promoted to us as a healthy diet?
I think the most important thing is just to look back at ancestral communities, real ancestral communities that raised their own animals, grew their own food, they foraged, they hunted, and what sort of foods were they eating? What nutrients were they obtaining? And that's it in a nutshell, Krisna. It's walking away from a lot of processed foods. And I'm not saying we never eat, like in the middle of winter, tinned tomatoes are great thrown in with a beautiful salmon dish or something like that. So I'm not saying I never eat anything that isn't processed, but we try to eat fresh, seasonal, local food. And if it's growing in my area, again, Gary often talks about fructose metabolism, which is his big biochemistry research project. And the fact that in the South Pacific or near the equator, where there's sunshine all the time, there's a lot of fruit that grows year round because the vitamin D makes the fructose metabolize and can be used by the body. It doesn't get stored and it doesn't get into as much trouble. But down here in Tasmania, we're nearly in Antarctica, we do not have fruit all year round. And that's because there is not a lot of sunshine in winter and our bodies would not be able to metabolize that fructose. So just purely looking at where you live, what is fresh, seasonal, locally produced food? And if you can steer to that as much as possible, I think that's the easiest way to not really overthink it. What's here? What can we eat?
And that's fantastic advice. It's totally in line what we promote at the Ovadia Heart Health team is eat a whole foods diet. Again, yes, who doesn't want to put a can of tomatoes maybe in their stew that they're cooking in the winter or something like that?
Yeah.
I know I've got some clients who are actually can their own tomatoes, which is even
Nice.
better.
Even better.
But that includes those ancestral foods. And it's interesting. I lived a couple decades in the Netherlands, and I have many of my Dutch friends who always laugh at this idea that there's a Mediterranean diet.
Yes.
And I did the little air quotes there for just listening in, because what country on the Mediterranean are we talking about? Are we talking about Turkey? Italy?
Well, that was my latest article. And honestly, I'm not sure if Pam's listening, Pam Devine from Low Carb USA, we had a quick chat this morning, but I spent 80 hours or over 80 hours writing that last article for Substack. And that's after 10 years of research. And I think because I've been immersed in this space for so long, Krisna, the patterns just start to come alive. I was like, oh my gosh, it's not until I start writing something, I go, wait a minute. And in my latest article, I say that lifestyle medicine needs cultural legitimacy. And I've just worked it out. They're now trying to, so they claimed the Blue Zones after being named a Blue Zone in 2005. Now they've bought the Blue Zones franchise in 2020. Right. So now it really is owned by the church, though most people would have no idea still. Dan Wooten fronts the marketing. So he is there. Walter Willett's also on the board of advisors. But, it's owned by the church. And lifestyle medicine accredits Blue Zone doctors now because, this is giving them a bit of legitimacy, but this next level into the Mediterranean is just mind-blowing, Krisna, and I'm not sure if you've read my latest post, but that's what I'm discussing. Half of the Mediterranean countries, countries bordering the Mediterranean are Islamic. And so they prohibit pork, and Judaism does as well. So, half prohibits pork, the other half embraces pork. Like, it's almost like the yin and the yang of
Very
the
much.
Mediterranean. And this is unbelievable. Again, Islam bans alcohol. Catholicism and Greek Orthodox celebrate alcohol. And then I looked at Catholicism and thought, all right, well, Catholicism bans warm-blooded animals, but they're allowed to eat fish in their fasting periods. But from the blue zones, when I was studying the blue zones really in depth, I realized that Ikaria, which is a blue zone, and Crete, which is the Mediterranean diet we've all been told is the healthiest diet in the world, they are both Greek Orthodox. And the lifestyle medicine, the World Lifestyle Medicine Organization, oh my gosh, they change their names all the time. So it's hard to keep up myself, let alone anyone else keeping up. But trust me, they have got a Mediterranean Lifestyle Medicine Institute that they've created. And this institute is trying to convince all the sister organizations around the world that the consensus to their invitation-only consensus statement on Leros Island is that Greek Orthodox fasting is vegan. That's 120 to 180 days a year, completely vegan. And I was like, I've just done a talk on the blue zones. I know Ikaria is not vegan. They eat snails. And I started to look into, well, why can they eat shellfish? Why can they eat snails when Catholicism avoids those things? And it wasn't anything to do with warm blood. It's red blood. So the Greek Orthodox can't eat red blood, whereas they're allowed to eat blue blood, which is shellfish, snails, because when the canonical texts were written, they thought those animals had no blood.
That's fascinating, right?
It is. And so it's not a vegan diet. They are absolutely misleading people to suggest that it is.
Right. And it's, as you say, it's now basically a franchise.
Yes,
the Blue
absolutely.
Zones is a franchise. And
it's a franchise owned by the church.
As a certified health coach, I know that you can become certified in the College of Lifestyle Medicine.
Yes.
So they are training people in their, I'm going to use the word, religious philosophy of nutrition. And I love this phrase you said, cultural legitimacy.
I know, it came to me. I kept thinking, oh my gosh, I've worked it out. And when that word just came to me, I was like, that's it. I've got it. They're wanting this cultural cloak, because to talk about Ellen G. White suggesting that demonizing animal proteins and fats is because of originally masturbation, and there's nothing they can do to say that wasn't why she was demonizing it in the beginning. But to pull it in under the Mediterranean cloak, which is Crete, which is Greek Orthodox, saying, well, for 120 to 180 days, they don't eat meat. So it's very little meat. So really it's vegan when they're fasting. So it just aligns with their messaging, and they're trying to wrap themselves in it. And I've just gone, wait a minute, this is not right either. And again, this isn't, I do name some people because they are very influential within this movement. And I think that an ideological belief is even more powerful than a financial incentive. So I'm not calling them out on their belief, but I'm calling them out as being highly influential to create this plant-biased messaging. But it's not targeting them. It's not being mean. It's just highlighting so some people know some of these big names. But the main thing I'm coming after is that the commercial church. The commercial church is making money on the Blue Zones franchise. They've got 36 patents pending. They're making frozen foods you can go and buy in the supermarket, and they're not even all from the Blue Zones. You can go on these wellness retreats franchised by the church. The church is making a lot of money from this franchise. They're making a lot of money from their cultural legitimacy. And this is the concern. And in Australia, Sanitarium is making a lot of money, and they don't pay any tax on their food products or the commercial wellness programs that they run. They're one of the biggest corporate wellness programs here in Australia and New Zealand. They run that for the government and beyond. Even America, the American College of Lifestyle Medicine is running Sanitarium's program, which was originally called CHIP and is now called Pivio Health, in corporate places. And Sanitarium pays no tax on it being run in America. So my concern is the corporatization of a church that's influencing what we eat and causing harm.
And this is super important and really interesting. Because at the Ovadia team, we run employee or corporate wellness programs.
Okay.
And we're really trying to, broaden the spectrum, open the conversation, because a lot of what is presented to companies, I'm not going to say it's College of Lifestyle Medicine or it's gone down that far, but it is being presented either by an insurance company, maybe by a, let's say, a medical provider. And these places are highly influenced by various organizations. Who knows? They might be influenced by the College of Lifestyle Medicine. They might think, well, the blue zones, everyone's going to live to 100. Let's adopt that. And
now they'll be Mediterranean diet as well. Like they're just capturing all of these terms: lifestyle medicine, blue zones, Mediterranean diet, all these things that people vaguely think, oh, that makes sense. That's healthy. That's good. They're capturing these terms and wrapping themselves in these cultural cloaks to present an ideology, unfortunately, at the very bottom of it.
And I'll ask you the same question, since we're involved in the employee wellness. What can companies do to, help broaden the conversation as well? So on an individual, it's eat as ancestral, try to, locally source and seasonally source your food. Companies are in a strange position here. They for historically, they've kind of outsourced wellness. And
absolutely. And that's on purpose. That's also been done on purpose, I'm sure.
Yes. There is the danger that you could be, just becoming part of this dialogue that is dictated by these other hidden influences.
And I think the concern is, Krisna, that a lot of these corporate wellness programs have a benevolent agenda, which is what lifestyle medicine does, which is what the Blue Zones does, which is what the Mediterranean lifestyle does. If you look at the elements, they talk about sleep, sunlight, community, purpose, reducing alcohol, not smoking. Like, there's a lot of things that are sensible within their conversation, even though we all know, well, maybe we don't, but the Mediterranean diet, they drink a lot of alcohol. In Icaria, I read this amazing thing where it said an elderly man, they produce their own alcohol. It's 18%. And he said, on the months that don't have an R in them, we don't drink until nighttime. But obviously that's their summer, and they're just, if they drank their 18% at 10 o'clock in the morning, they wouldn't get up again. So, we've been brainwashed as well, or whitewashed, to think they don't drink a lot of alcohol, but there is a lot of alcohol drunk in the traditional Mediterranean, in the traditional blue zones. Not in Loma Linda, there's none at all. But I think for companies looking at these things, then it's very hard, because they see all these tick boxes that sound very good, and then it just says nutrition, or it just says diet, or it says a plant-based diet. And at the moment, we've been brainwashed to think a plant-based diet is healthy, but not necessarily that it means no animal proteins or fat. And then this fear of cholesterol that came about from the 1977 McGovern report. Everyone goes, oh, you can't have cholesterol. Cholesterol's bad. You go, well, what is cholesterol? I love Zoe Harkin's whole pull apart of that messaging. It's so clever. It's these subliminal messages, and the media pushes them out, that when a company decides they want to do a corporate wellness program, they see the boxes that they want to tick. So I think a company has to really then do a bit of a deep dive into what the nutrition aspect would be from that. But unfortunately, because they've been brainwashed to think plant-based and low-fat and everything is good, and there's a lot of education to come, but how fantastic that you guys are doing it. And I really hope that it takes off. I mean, this is what we need, real health, ancestral health to be coming to the fore, not a packaged
Love
health.
that. And we have actually a case study that if anyone's interested in finding out what we did with a small dental firm in Oregon
Yes.
and the results we got with just a 6-month program with them, and was a wonderful experience. You can download it here for free, ovadiahearthealth.com/case studies, with a line between case and studies if you're just listening. We do have a few questions here. I love that everyone's listening in. Alistair asked, didn't the Kellogg's brothers fall out over the direction of the company?
The Kellogg's brothers did fall out. They fell out because William Keith wanted to add sugar. He saw other groups, Charles Post, adding sugar and potentially becoming more successful than they were in Battle Creek, even though they started the cereal industry. So John Harvey Kellogg was, as I say, a devout follower. He lived with Ellen and James White from the age of 12. He called her mother, and he did not want to go down the sugar. He didn't want to add sugar to his things because she said it didn't need sugar. She did eat jams and fruits and other things, but she was against adding sugar to a cereal at the time. And William Keith just said, but this is such a good business model, I'm not going to let the others beat us. So they broke off. And John Harvey Kellogg kept his Sanitarium foods, his Sanitas foods, I had quite a few different brands that he was making. And William Keith just went straight down the Kellogg's brand. And there was a bit of a problem with when he called it Kellogg's as well. But yeah, it's a fascinating story. I think there's a book being written about the Kellogg's brothers, and yeah, it was very interesting.
We'll have to dig into that one. We have another question. Does low carb get into the dietary guidelines this time? Well, we not too long ago had Nina Teicholz
Yes.
on our live stream here talking about the guidelines. I don't think we know that for sure. You might have some insight, Belinda, other than I do. We're hoping it is at least an option. There has been so much good research on the low carbohydrate, at what's being called therapeutic low carb nutrition. And however, I don't know that the jury's out. I don't know if you have any insight with your sources.
I think over time, they're going to have a hard time saying that low carb is dangerous, even though they're still trying to do it. It's the fat, the healthy fats, the animal fats that's going to take so much longer. I was chatting to Brett Scher in America as well, and he said, look, I'm going down the mental health space. I'm finding so much excitement and so much joy in medicine, seeing people improve their health mentally, but cardiologists are really holding on to that saturated fat harms you in the space, not you guys, but you know, in general, right. They're holding on to that a lot harder than most other groups. And he said they'll probably be the last to turn around as a group. But I think low carb has been adopted into our type 2 diabetes guidelines, which was Gary's. When he was told he couldn't talk about it because it wasn't the guidelines, and someone said to him, someone at the board said, you can never talk about it till it's part of the guidelines. And if you want to talk about it, then change the guidelines. So in 2023, Gary, James Muki, and a few others, they were very, very excited to finally get into our national guidelines that low carb is a safe option to use in the management of type 2 diabetes. So for us, that's huge. I don't know if it'll get into the normal dietary guidelines. And in my recent article for the Mediterranean Lifestyle Medicine Institute, one of the people, or the founder of that Mediterranean Lifestyle Medicine Institute, did a 2024 article suggesting that low carb causes type 2 diabetes, but her reference was 187 grams per day was low carb. Didn't even, it's
Really low carb, right?
It wasn't low carb by any statistical relevance, but it doesn't matter. That's the headlines that came out in the papers. Nina Teicholz talked about it. It went to America, like low carb causes type 2 diabetes. That's all they need. They just need those headlines to just keep popping up. It's not until you dig deep and go, wait a minute, makes no sense whatsoever. So in the 2020 US dietary guidelines, I pointed out to Nina that Joan Sabat was on the board determining the capsule unsaturated fat, and he was a devout Seventh-day Adventist, and of course he wanted it to be 0. I'm not 100% sure with the low carb. That messaging could sneak in a little bit, but yeah, how do we talk about animal protein and fat? That's, again, I thought it was just about sugar, and then I realized Gary was in just as much trouble for talking about the health benefits of animal proteins and fats. It's a very complicated and complex discussion when they're wanting to push this plant-based messaging. And it's not just the church, it's Coca-Cola, it's Nestle, it's all the big food, all the big ag. Like, they want us to grow food. It's the chemical companies, it's the pharma companies. Like, it is a big push for us to eat fake food that's made in a lab.
Absolutely. And they have deep pockets. We do not.
Deep pockets.
And I personally am very honored to work with a heart surgeon who, is himself pretty much carnivore these days. And that, talks about the nuance. Again, we promote whatever anyone wants to eat, but we think that animal foods, particularly animal fats, are part of a healthy diet. And we want to make sure that everyone understands that perspective as well.
We were the same. We had Nutrition for Life for a few years, and they've continued on, but they were coming after him for that too. So we had to give it away. But part of, we were very supportive and respectful of anybody who had a belief, a cultural belief, an ethical belief in what they chose to eat. It's not an individual's choice. It's when it's being put on everybody else. But at an individual level, how can you support these people to be the healthiest they can be? And understanding from Denise Minger's work, she did a big takedown of the China study many years ago. I read all of that. It was so clever. But she was a vegan, and she's had a recovering vegan and not vegan anymore, like Leah Keith. But the idea that you could eat a mussel or an oyster because they don't have a nervous system. So technically, they're not an animal. So, then you start to get into some really complex conversations with people about what they could eat that actually will provide a lot of nutrition, even if they say they don't want to eat an animal protein. It's very
something
clever.
We promote is, think of your food for performance. What is actually going to help you perform in life, in work. And you mentioned briefly some names here. I'll just help our audience. Brett Shear, who is now with the Metabolic Mind. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I think what we're seeing, your work is just incredible, but this the explosion of, I call it metabolic psychiatry, I think is also really going to help our efforts in seeing the benefits of nutrition from all kinds of aspects. It's not just about the scale or your waistline, but maybe there's certain foods that are really going to help you, as Dr. Georgia Ede says, heal your brain. And
I know, it's so exciting. I'm honestly, it's really exciting, Krisna.
It's very exciting. I did Dr. Ede's course, and she's just lovely. As we kind of come towards the end, oh man, we could keep talking for hours. I'm just so appreciative of the work that you've done. And I think it's really important for individuals as well as anyone who's trying to encourage their company to do a company program. Do your due diligence. Look at the sources. And it's not just look at what papers they cited. It's who's writing those. Who are they funded by? I mean, you pulled the cover off of so much of what we understood from not only the religious of the Seventh-day Adventists, but also this whole movement now to franchise the blue zones, the influence of this College of Lifestyle Medicine.
Yes.
what would be some closing thoughts or inspiration, or tell us a little bit about what you're looking into now? Anything that we haven't touched on in this last hour?
I guess I would like to do a much bigger expose on the blue zones, and not necessarily just the past and the present, but the future. And I think there's some really fascinating things that have occurred because these beautiful communities were called a blue zone, and how Western civilization wanting to go to a place to see how to live to 100 is actually ruining that place. There's some really fascinating research I've done into that. And also the idea that Dan Buettner wants to call Singapore a blue zone. I've done a lot of research into that. And you can laugh, but the scary thing is he talks because it's an engineered one. So Loma Linda was bought, but now Singapore is completely engineered, their rules and their regulations. And he says, Dan Buettner actually says in his article, people like living under a mild Taliban.
That's
because
right.
then you know what's expected of you. Like, this is very scary. So I'm going to go into that space, which is going to be big. And I'm also going to do a lot more of a deep dive into Ellen G. White because, there's been a lot. I follow a lot of ex-Seventh-day Adventists. I'm friends with ex-Seventh-day Adventists and also with a couple of Seventh-day Adventists. Again, it's about supporting these people in their change and in their understanding, but also learning from them. I've learned a lot from them, and I would like to put it out into my community, what I've been learning for the last 10 years, because my community doesn't know this information. So I'm also going to do a big deep dive into some of that. So hopefully, if no one finds it interesting, it won't matter. I'll have put it down. So I'll find it interesting.
Well, there's many of us that will be following it deeply, and want to just thank you for your meticulous work that you've uncovered and what you've shared. Speaking of opening up the knowledge base within our community and the broader globe, and thrilled that we could have you from Tasmania on our
Thank you.
live stream on Monday. And I want to thank all the listeners who tuned in today. You've got a big following, Belinda, here in the US.
Thank you.
And again, if you want to find out more about Belinda's work, follow her on Substack, truthzones.substack.com. If you'd like to know more about our success with our employee wellness programs, download our case studies, Ovadia Heart Health /case Stripe studies, and keep tuning in to our Monday live streams. I'm honored to be able to be hosting them, and thank you so much, Belinda. I'm so glad we could see each other live in San Diego. And I look forward to the next time, and maybe we can have a coffee together one of these.
I like that idea. Thanks, Krisna.
And
thank you.
Keep doing all the great work.
All right. Thank you. Bye.